Hey everybody. So I'm in the process of writing a melody, a theme, a little motive popped into my head, and one thing that you guys have often asked about is the process behind the scenes, right? Because I've written a melody. I think the only time I ever wrote a melody on camera was for the original Let's Write Music series, and I just kind of went through it. It just kind of came into my head, and I didn't really explain my thought process. So this tiny little fragment of a motive popped into my head, and it's sort of a medieval style theme, and I'm writing a portfolio piece, a big sort of swashbuckling kind of main theme, as if the main theme for a project. And so I haven't written the melody. I only have a single motive. And so here I am at the piano. So hopefully this isn't too terrible audio quality. Let me know if you can hear everything well. But yeah, so I'm going to try and take this motive and turn it into a melody, and I'm going to try and be as clear as possible with my thought process and what's going through my head. Even though a lot of it's going to be aesthetic and intuitive, I'm going to try and articulate it, and hopefully by the end of this video, however, I quit playing Minecraft. Oh, it's so hilarious. Hopefully, we'll see. It depends upon how the melody turns out. But in any case, yeah. So let's see. All right. So the motive is right. So those three notes, in and of themselves, I think the intervallic quality of those notes, right? There are a lot of melodies that contain that. It's sort of like a, pentatonic leading tone, right? It's not, but it's, you could think of the Pirates of the Caribbean theme. You could think of a Shrek, right? So there are a lot of melodies that use that, but that motive, those three notes combined with this rhythm, let's see. Oh, I forgot the motive. Oh no. That's it. Dee da 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 dee. That's the motive. Da 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 dee. Sol do te sol do. Right, in solfege. So I'm gonna experiment with that motive and see if we can build an entire tune. And I'm gonna try to avoid using typical harmonic structures that I use. So so like the typical Dorian 1 going to 4, etc. And I'm going to try and develop it in a way that is catchy, but at the same time unique, and maybe not having, some of the typical devices that I use. So, so, a little bit of function change there. So we could take the motive and repeat it. So first off, dee dee da dee dee dee, right? Doo da da dee da da da. We're taking the motive dee da da dee and dee da da da. We're transposing it up a fourth, right? And then on the fourth scale degree, which is kind of our target note, dee da da da. We could, and I'm in the key of A minor right now. Excuse me. So we could do D major, dee da da da, sort of borrow from Dorian, or we could do B flat major, borrow from Phrygian, and that function change can go either way. So we could go we could do B flat first and then do D. And in that case, I'm using a D major in first inversion, which gives us an F sharp in the bass, so we get a nice minor sixth interval against the D, right? So there are a lot of options here. So we could start with brightness, or start with darkness like we did there with the B flat, and then go bright with the D, or start bright and go dark. So we'll play the other one. So I kind of like that, right? So we might change up the harmonic structures a little bit, but let's go with that. So first with the D major chord, and secondly with the B flat major chord, okay? And now we'll see if we can make slight change the motive, the second time we perform it, vary it slightly, right? Because that's what happens in sentence structure. You have a motive, you immediately reiterate it, usually with a little bit of variation, and then you have the answer or continuation. So I think it's maybe a bit dull to do it. It's certainly memorable and catchy, but it's a bit dull to do it the exact same way the second time. So let's try out a couple of variants. So like that. Maybe we can do that. So those are two options. Both of them work. Both of them sound, to me, emotionally satisfying. But the way that I would differentiate those is the first one that goes up higher leaves us wanting more, right? Like we're reaching for something, and so that might be an aesthetic that you'd want, and this is a case where I would, if I was working on a game or a film or a scene or a character, psychoanalyze what I'm going for, and maybe one might be good as opposed to the other, right? And then maybe if I use one as opposed to the other, I can still use the other one at a later time for a development of the theme. And the other one, right, that kind of brings us into more of an introspective, especially if we change it harmonically. We could go darker, we could go, so right, we're ending on the note G, so the G could be the third of an E flat major chord, so which is kind of nice, right? So let's toy with that. Like that, right? And that right there, that's me making it an E flat major 7th chord, and that D can sort of slip down to the C. Okay, it's kind of a jazz concept that the 13 is substitutable for the 7th, right? And we sort of get a C minor chord, and the C minor chord is immediate substitution for E flat, and it's just one note that's slipping, right? And we can go or you could take that and vary it in any number of ways that you want. So let's play the tune up to that point, and we'll see what should come next. Right? So we could go a couple of ways with this. We could continue to go down the dark path, or we could think, well, you know what, I'm contemplating, but no, it's like I actually, after you contemplate, you realize that the original thing that you were thinking of, what the emotion you were feeling, is justified after you contemplate, right? Because when you have some sort of contemplation, I know this is very vague poetic language, but if you have this sort of contemplation, right, which to me is going on the dark side of the circle of this. If you have this sort of contemplation, two results could happen from that. One, the contemplation causes you to sort of rethink your worldview, so to speak, right, in a very aesthetic way. Or the contemplation could cause you to reinforce what you already know. And I think in this particular case, for whatever intuitive reason, that's the way that I want to go, which means going back to A minor, right? So we're down in E flat major, and we started in A minor. We could go back to A minor, and the fact that we started on A minor means that it's not necessarily going to sound super foreign, right? Because we started on A minor, even though A minor technically is a tritone away from E flat, so it's pretty far in terms of root motion. But let's try that and see how it works. So I like that. All right, now what are we going to do next? There are a lot of options here. That's kind of nice. It's a little cheesy. It's also a little too high, right? That goes pretty far up where we don't want to extend our range of our melody, the range of our melody too much, because then it's not singable, right? And at least I personally, in my melodies, I try to make them as small and singable and compact as possible so anyone can whistle it or hum it, right? So we'll continue from that phrase. So that's going back dark, so I kind of want to go brighter. That's okay, that's satisfying. It's a little cliche, right? That's kind of like Ray's theme. Right, so a lot of melodies kind of focus around the scale of degrees, so maybe we could avoid it for originality's sake. We could try out some crazy chords. They most likely won't work, but you might, sometimes a fearless harmonic experimentation, thinking about melody and harmony and how they impact one another. So, I wanted to go to the F, the note F, which is the fifth of B flat, but let's think about what other chords could work with F, even if they're outside of A minor. We could think of D flat major. The third of F is D flat major. Alright, so that's a little weird. Right, so it could be a nice development, right? But it's a little too strange. Right, D minor's too bland. Right, it's kind of going to a 2-5-1. It's a little too homey for this tune, I think, because I think of the 2-5-1. 4-5-1 is kind of bright homey. 2-5-1 is kind of nostalgic homey. Like 4-5-1. Right, has a very nice kind of like, yeah, let's chill. And 2-5-1, same thing. Right, but since we're using minor 2 instead of 4, it's a bit more nostalgic, right? So I think that's this tune has a kind of ya da da dum dum, has a almost Asian kind of sage-like quality to it, and I think that brings it out of the seriousness to do that type of thing. So. That's interesting. We could speed up the harmonic rhythm. We could go to some sort of D major chord like we did at the beginning, so unifying it. But then we could either go to D minor, right, or F major, which is a mediant substitution of a chromatic substitution, right? So we can substitute D major for D minor, and then we can go a step further and we can substitute D minor for F major. So even though F major is far away from D major, right, we could still substitute that. And that's a chromatic mediant, and that's the type of thing that you hear in Lord of the Rings. Right. So let's try that. So I like that, but I'm not sure how it feels in context. So let's go back and play the tune from the beginning. And this is a very important thing. I think some composers, including myself, have a tendency or a temptation to get lazy, right? You think, oh, I'm working on a melody, I'm working on bar 5, I can just focus on bar 5. But to listen to, you will have to think about the context of a motive in the larger phrase, right? You could write something that sounds good, and this goes for all composition, not just melody. You could write something that sounds good in a bar, but it may not feel right in the larger scope. It may feel out of place, even though it's still a good idea from the micro perspective. So let's play this in context. So, continuing on, that feels logical. That also reminds me of Chronicles of Narnia. And again, that's getting into, I don't know, anytime you have sort of 1, 2, 3, there are so many melodies that are like that. right? That's Shostakovich festivity, or right. So going 1, 2, 3 is like one of the most well-worn melodic devices. Doesn't mean don't use it, but I think I'm gonna avoid it, especially when it's the seventh of 4, right? So that's the note C, right? Going on top of D minor. That's kind of a cliche. Right, that's kind of something you hear a lot in that kind of heroic style film and game music. So, by the way, what I'm doing with the bass there is I'm just moving down. So we're going from A minor, right, and then I'm going to, my melody is spelling, right, which is basically just D and A, and we've got a little, escape tone in there. But we'll consider the D and A the substantive notes. So we think, well, D and A, what is missing from that? Well, some sort of F, right? F could be D minor, F sharp could be D major. So that means that in order to make the bass line complementary, it would make sense to make this a D major chord in first inversion. And this is the thing we talked about with the E.T. theme, right? Right, by making those chords in first inversion, you get you get an imperfect consonance between the outer voices, right, between your melody and your bass, as well as just making the melody and the bass line not redundant to one another, but complementary in terms of harmony, right? And then all I did was I filled it in, right? A moves down to a F sharp, and so I filled it in with a G. And this is a general rule for part writing and writing bass lines. Whenever you have the interval of a third, you can fill it in with stepwise motion, and it generally sounds perfectly fine because it's a passing tone, and a passing tone is allowed in even the strictest of counterpoints, the unaccented passing tone. And another tip, if you have the leap of a fourth, right, you can fill it in with 2 passing tones, and either a triplet rhythm, ya da da dum, or some combination of 16th and 8th. So ya da dum dum or yum da da dum, right? But that's irrelevant for now. So no, I didn't. Right, and then we change the F sharp to F natural, get that nice dramatic direct chromaticism. We could go to D minor or F major. I like that. That's F major. I also like D minor. I'm not sure which I like more. So maybe we could keep both of those options open, and it'll make it so clear which one is more appropriate when we go to, orchestrate it. So let me play it in context again. And now we've had the D da da dee dee da 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 ba 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 da da ba 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 ba, right? So we have that consistent intervallic structure and rhythm. So I think it would be nice if we got away from that, so it's not so cookie cutter inevitable for the last, because I think it's already cemented itself as a motive. So we can kind of toy around with these motives, right? And that's something that actually Alan Belkin, I don't know if you all are familiar with him, but he wrote a book recently called Musical Composition, Craft, and Art. It's an excellent book, and he talks about developing motives and how many phrases of melodies contain 2 or 3 motives, and the motives start out back and forth, right? Motive A, motive B, motive A, motive B, and then the more you become comfortable with them and comfortable with the sequence, you can change up the order. So motive B, motive A, or motive B, motive B, motive A, right? To keep it more interesting. So I'm thinking, instead of going and then doing some variety of instead of doing some variety of motive A, we can continue with that mode. We could take that melody and continue that motive, that B motive, and continue to develop it. The only other thing that the other thing that I want to say about this particular development is the expansion, right? You can take a motive, and if you have a leap, you can expand it, right? If you have stepwise motion and you expand the stepwise motion to a leap, it obfuscates the original contour of the melody a little bit more, but generally it's pretty easy to expand leaps, right? And you could hear that in my Friends and Foes, right? Right? That motive, that first interval, that leap of a minor third, later on is expanded to a major sixth, right? Which is the inversion of a minor third. right? But it's still, you can clearly perceive how it's a development of the first motive, right? So I was saying, it starts out with a leap of a fourth, and later on, we expand it to a fifth, okay? So, sorry. That's nice. That's F major over E flat. It's a little cloudy, maybe not as satisfying as we want the cadence of our melody to be. Maybe we could just totally change it. Right, we could sort of start developing a new little strand. I think I'm going to play it again from the beginning and see if we hear something. I like that, but again, I still feel like it's too. It's not as homey as the 2-5-1 before, but it's still a little bit. We're kind of losing the seriousness. You know what I mean? So, but I like that. That reminds me of. I think it's Debussy. But let's toy around with that, okay? I don't know. I kind of like that. So, right? So we're kind of staying on the F. We go, and then we stay on the F, right? We keep going, right? You don't always need to have a new chord. And then we continue to elaborate on it, like you're taking a breath and you continue to elaborate. And, right? So that's that motive. We're just sequencing it down pentatonically, which is still related to the original motive. It's not completely unrelated, but it's more of a more substantive development. And we're going from F major, substituting it for its mediant, right, or submediant rather, D minor, right, and then we can do a 2-5-1. I think as long as we're careful, for the, and then just like we rearticulate the F, we rearticulate the D, right? So even the harmonic rhythm, we set up a pattern and then we repeat it. So. We could just have a nice, because normally I do that type of a thing, right? So I definitely overdo that, and there's more than one way. That definitely, being the dominant, has the most pull, right? But we could use, well, I like to think of, if you all know what a deceptive cadence is, for example, if we're in, C major and we go from G to A minor, right? A minor is a submediant substitution for C major, right? The relative minor, you can think about it however you want. It's a more mild way of landing on A minors, right? Right, and even without the dominant seventh, right? Right, it's a mild, as opposed to using the raised dominant, right? So we could land on G major, as a kind of resting point, make it very mild. And that can still lead back into a repetition of the melody or somewhere else. It doesn't have quite as much pull as the raised seventh dominant chord that I like to use, but we'll try it. Okay, so let's see if we can play it in context, see if I can remember it. And that's another thing too. If I play through a melody and I can't, and this is something that Hans Zimmer, of all people, I've got nothing against Hans Zimmer, but he gave, I think, a pretty good piece of advice. In one of his interviews, he said that if he composes something, to a certain extent, I don't think he said this verbatim, but he doesn't write it down, because if he can't remember it just from memory, then it isn't memorable enough to have been worth keeping, right? And so to a certain extent, I subscribe to that. I mean, there's always a limit to human musical memory, but if I go back and play it and I can't remember what I did, well, it's not that memorable, right? So let's see. Sorry. Let me start over. And then, so we're down on C major, and we could go to D minor. I kind of like that. It is pretty mild to my ears. It always could lead somewhere else. That's one thing that Villa-Lobos, for example, was a part of his style. He did all the time. He would introduce a melody that you would think would have some sort of like dominant chord or end on the tonic, but then he'd always go somewhere else with it. And the idea is that you're thwarting the expectation. The expectation is that you're going to go there, right? For example, there's a tune from his guitar concerto that goes, which I'm actually talking about in my melody video that I've been scripting, is and what do you hear? But every time he doesn't do that. He continues to think, right, and he keeps on going. And so there's a certain amount of thwarting that can happen. So yeah, I kind of like that. I think we'll leave it at that for now. So I'm pretty satisfied with what I have. It's always liable to change, right? Whenever you start dealing with hearing it in the dressing of actual orchestration, your ear and intuition may cause you to change certain ideas. So yeah. Anyway, I hope that was helpful to you all. I'll look at the chat. Oh goodness. I'm just gonna read through here and see if I can respond to any of your comments real quick. My phone's at 10% battery life, so if this just quits all of a sudden, that's why. Gordon wants to hear some major sharp 11. Talk about doing a video to say more about going from major to minor, minor to major. Is that still planned? Yeah, I plan on adding a lot more to my harmonic relativity videos. Talk a little bit your piece, Sylvan Odyssey. I'm definitely going to talk about Sylvan Odyssey. It always surprises me. I guess it shouldn't, but that piece is actually my most listened to piece on SoundCloud, so it's definitely something that I want to do a video on in the future. Right on the Locrian. Please upload this later. Oh yeah, I'm definitely going to upload it. How your manner is so on edge is exciting. Yeah, I'm definitely hyper. Had a lot of coffee. Lower to step motif. No, thanks, Chris. Yeah, it is a great book, Jose. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I have a huge giant tripod with like a crazy overhead. I could have brought it and set it up, but I was just too lazy. My apologies. I was hoping since it was pretty simple and tonal and if I explained it, you'd have an idea of what was going on. Sounds like music for an ancient altar in a forest. Yeah, sage-like. That's what I was thinking. Oh, you can set up donations on streams? I didn't even know that. The cadence. Oh, did I do the... Wait. Oh, the cadence. I thought you meant the lick for a second, but you mean the... Things are going great, Frodo. Frodo7241. Raise 7 dominant. Oh, what I mean is that when you have a dominant and minor, you go chromatically outside of the natural minor to get that raise 7th leading tone. So for an A minor, right, that's just sticking with all the white keys in the piano. That's A natural minor, also known as A Aeolian. If you raise the G to G sharp, right, you get harmonic minor, right? You can also raise the F sharp so that you avoid the interval of an augmented second, you know, right, like the Addams Family, but yeah, okay, so you know what I'm talking about. Or maybe I misunderstood your question. In the 5th movement of my string symphony, I combined an octave melody, Phrygian melody, and work. Ooh, I'd be interested to hear that. Email that over to me, Philip Daniel. Definitely a better singer than Glenn Gould. That's funny. Yeah. I didn't call it harmonic minor because I didn't address the 7th scale degree in the melody or the harmony. So it's to a certain extent ambiguous. I think it's clearer to just say that I've raised the 7th degree of the scale for whatever reason. So if I used the F sharp or F, I would have called it harmonic minor, melodic minor. But I don't know. I'm kind of half ensconced in the jazz world and half ensconced in the classical world. So there are many differing terminologies between the two. So I'm hesitant to pick one over the other. So I tend to just speak things as plainly as possible. But anyway, thank you all so much for joining. Hopefully this will upload properly, and I hope you got something out of this. Happy composing to you all. Stay tuned for the next installment of my melody series, which I'm busy scripting, working on. I'll answer this one last question. What composers would you say... thanks, Philip. What composers would you say your style of composition is most derived from? I know you mentioned John Williams a lot, and it made me wonder what other composers you take inspiration from. Yeah, John Williams, Koji Kondo, Nobuo Uematsu, Jeremy Soule, Stravinsky, Ravel, Debussy, Radhavara, Ludoslavsky, Duke Ellington. Who's the guy that composed Nutville? Horace Silver, I think. I love a lot of his stuff. Rimsky-Korsakov. I mean, I could name a bunch of composers, but definitely Uematsu, Koji Kondo. As far as the video game's concerned, Tiger and Hamasyan, Jacob Collier is a huge influence. Yeah, I could name a ton of influences, and they really do influence me. I study all of their music. I think my first main influence was actually Koji Kondo, and then John Williams was my second huge influence. And then I kind of spread off and diversified, and Stravinsky maybe was the next big one. I've never heard of Franz Schrecker. We'll check it out. Definitely. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining. I will see you all later.